So today, as we step into this new one, kind of what I wanted to focus on today was a bit more toward overall might be the concept of presets. But and I'm sure most of you are familiar with presets, but it's so kind of the direction I wanted to take it was in the realm of the sense of thinking outside of the box per se. So rather than just getting into the standard version of presets, how can you leverage presets even more so to ultimately get to um, solutions that will be helpful to you in more of the edge cases in a sense. So for example, so I'm going to review a couple different areas, and not maybe necessarily that these alone are the ones that you would need to use, but maybe they might start to jog your thinking in a direction of like, oh, I could leverage something that way that maybe you hadn't considered before. So one of them relates to window trim. Probably most of you are familiar with the idea that you can draw in the area of lap siding, and then you can go to an area of lap siding and box out, subtract the sections, and then use that area to get the trim. But what if you're doing a job where you actually aren't calling the siding and you just need to be able to call the trim? Is there a faster way to be able to box in all of that trim area without actually drawing the siding itself? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to trace in an area here. And so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to say, okay, well, I want this area and I want to add my edge to this area. I want my edge application to be window and door trim. And I want my edge product to be something like, say, a 1x6 clear trim. And so now I've added in all of this area, right? And now I don't even need the area. Right now it's hard to see it because it's on this dark window, but it's pink back there. But I'm going to go ahead and take the area and I'm going to remove it. And so now what I'm left with is just a box that has an edge on it of window trim, and it's the product that I want, the application that I want. And so I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to save this as a preset. I'll call this my window trim. And I'll click OK. And so now that I've got that, I could even just delete this, say I don't need this anymore. And so if I was in a job that I was just calling window trim, where, maybe it was a stucco job or, something else where I wasn't actually going to call the siding, or maybe it was a mixed siding job. In any case, I just need to be able to call the trim. I can come up here to my area tool. Here's my window trim. And if you're not familiar with this, one of the things you also can do is you use the area tools. If you hold down the shift key while you activate any of these area type tools, whether it's the area, the floor, or the roof, you can get the box or rectangular type of draw motion. So I'm going to hold down shift, hit my preset. You can see I'm in rectangle mode, and that would allow me then to just box and capture all of that trim just like that. So I'm just capturing all those pieces, and I'm getting with just a couple of clicks, I'm getting all those pieces of trim in, not even though I actually haven't even drawn the siding area. And for some of you, depending on how you like to operate, that actually may be even a more useful tool to you rather than trying to use the box subtract section from an area. So that's one approach, or one type of preset you could leverage that's a little bit different than the norm. Another one, I'm going to jump over here to a floor system. And let's say that we wanted to, this is a dimensional floor here, and we wanted some mid-span X bracing to be here on this. And of course, that becomes a little bit problematic. One is with a couple reasons. One, we don't necessarily have an application in here called X bracing per se. So if you are looking for some mid-span X bracing, it's like you're not going to find an application that looks like that. And then of course you've got the issue of that bracing is typically installed diagonally, at a pitch as you're looking down from the top. So what would be a way that you could easily get that X bracing and not have to struggle through that all the time? So I'm going to come here. I'm going to use my segment tool to do this. I'm going to click start to draw, click the endpoint. And so now I've got my linear feet of line. So to start with, I'm going to go to my application, and kind of off the screen here for you, I realize, but basically what I'm going to find is I'm going to find under all applications, I'm going to find the bracing application. I'll take that. And now that I've called this as bracing, I can actually come over here and I can rename this. So hopefully you're familiar with this, but if not, just be aware that you can always rename an application. Underneath, this is still the bracing application. So it still carries with it that that flavor in a sense, or all of those products that are associated with it. It's still bracing underneath, but you can basically do a rename on it. And as we do a preset, that rename will stick. That can actually be especially useful if you're using some of the generic applications. So like generic CNT, generic LF, generic QL, those types of applications you can leverage and use, especially in the preset world, rename it and save that preset, and it will automatically come in with that renamed value. So I've renamed this as X bracing. I'm going to go to product. I'm going to look in my more products window here, use some 1x4 since that's what I like to use. And so now how do I handle the fact that I need 2 rows? Well, that's pretty obvious, but I can right click here and do 2 plies. So now I've got 2 plies of this stuff to can handle, both directions of the brace. And now to account for the fact that that stuff is essentially is diagonal, it's pitched, then I'll just actually apply a pitch to it. I'll say, hey, this is going to be pitched at, say a 10-12 pitch. Maybe it's something else for how you prefer to do it, but so now I've got all that in there. Again, I can run and right click on this. I'm going to save this as a preset. I'll call this my X bracing, and then I can just delete this. Now, again, put this in my template file, and as I'm coming along, whenever I need to do, leverage just that type of thing, I can right click here, come to X bracing, and basically just all I'm left to do is just draw in some linear footage, and I'm already have a renamed application, got my right product, it's got a pitch on it, it's got 2 plies, so really quickly I can get to the type of material I'm after. So again, like I commented at the beginning, maybe you don't use these specific things that I'm showing, but again, just kind of giving you ideas of how can you press further out and get more to those edge cases rather than having to waste time on something that's a little bit more tedious, get it teed up for yourself in the future. Here's another one, and jump over here to the roof. Collar ties. And so here's one. I won't go through the process of setting it all up, but here's another one. It's like if I had collar ties that were across, like say, if this was a stick frame roof right here, the rafters running up and down on the page, I could draw in another area and actually draw out all those collar ties, but that could get a little bit tedious in trying to get it the right length and all. And then maybe I needed a multiple different places on the building. So rather than drawing out those members, since there's not really necessarily much value in displaying those collar ties, I just need to get the values. What I've done here is I've right-clicked, or I've taken a linear line, I've assigned a count spacing to it, and I've made that count, you can see is arrayed here every, let's see, what do I have it set at? Every 32 inches, so it's kind of assumes 16 inches on the center rafters. And I've made that count, instead of it being just like a count item, it's actually an LF. It has linear footage associated to it, kind of like a post. Except in this case, I've assigned the application of collar tie, and the product I'm using is 2x6, and then I've specifically set the length as 10 feet. Maybe your default for a collar tie is typically is 8 feet, whatever. You can make it whatever you like. But now what I'm left with is when I need to go and draw collar ties, so I can right click on here, I can save this as a preset, call this collar tie. And you'll notice the other thing that I also did over here is I actually renamed the linear line as collar tie line. So I'm not necessarily using this linear footage line, but I want to know what it is. So I'm not confused by the fact that I haven't linked it. I'm wondering what I maybe have missed out on. So I'm going to hit delete, and I'm going to come up here. And again, so whenever I need a collar tie set, I can just click here. And in this case, rather than having to draw out a whole area and try to set the on-center spacing and everything, I can just go around and just click the areas where I want to collect all those collar ties, and it's going to be array those out, and I'm going to get those lengths as I need them. I could adjust those lengths as well and have them, instead of it being 10 foot in a certain area, they could be the 8s or they could be 12s. So easy to make adjustments as you go. So there's another idea or another concept that you get around. Shifting a little bit away from takeoff tools, and well, actually, I'm going to come back to one more takeoff tool here just at the end, but just show you another idea as it relates to notes. So let's say that you have a note that you use frequently on your projects that you'd like to be able to stamp here onto your plan. You know, maybe it's a out for approval, or not ready for construction yet, or maybe it's pay attention to this area, and you kind of see it all the time. One of the things you can do with note presets, I can right click. I'm going to come here. I'm going to create a note, and I'm going to say, hey, this is my special note, and this could be truly a special note. So I could type it out here, and I'm going to make this, center justified. I'm going to have my special note part. I'm going to pick, something that's more eye-catching for that special note part, and make it really big, like 22, turn the color to red. I can do all this customization that I want, with this note. And so I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to draw this in here. And then maybe I also want this to come with other things. Like I want my border style or border color to be like black, and my border thickness to be 2. And I want my background color to be like green. So now I've got some pretty custom stuff here that, rather than having to set something like that up every time, and maybe you've never actually thought of using a note like this before, but if it was this easy, like I'm about ready to show you, maybe you would use it more and you could leverage it in a certain situation. So right here, I'm going to go and save this as preset. I'm going to call this my special note. And then I'm going to just go ahead and delete this one. So now up here on my note tool, I again have a preset, use special note. It automatically pre-fills with all of that formatting that's right there. I could change or tweak something if I needed to, since I'm right here, but I'll click OK, and I'll just draw it in. Comes with all those, green background, black border, et cetera, et cetera. So again, even beyond just takeoff tools, dimension tools would be another one. If you like your dimensions to be, red lines or black lines with red text, and the text is bigger or larger or smaller, and it's set to a certain values to round to, you can do all that with dimension tool here, presets, and lots of different things there. Finally, one other one as we kind of round out today's discussion, and I didn't really mention at the beginning, but again, the QA, as normal, the QA portion of your webinar tools, that's available. Feel free to jump in there and ask any questions. But I'm going to close out here with one other tool. Again, just trying to think beyond how we might normally do things. I'm going to go to this deck. A couple quick comments on decks before I jump into the preset itself. Decks are maybe, for many of you, one of those things that you might have a client come into you and say, hey, I want to build a deck, and they don't have any plans. You can totally have a template file that would be set up for specifically that situation if you see that on a regular basis. So have a template file that's already geared toward decks. You maybe already have a blank page loaded in like this. You can add grids to it. And if any of this stuff that I'm saying right here doesn't make any sense to you, feel free to reach out to support. We can tell you how to do this type of stuff. But you could have a blank page with grids. You can have presets set up specifically for decks. Like it already has the decking added. It already has things set for a deck ledger and hangers that you might use, as well as you can draw with keyboard controls rather than having to use the mouse to get specific dimensions. You could actually use the keyboard to actually go certain directions, 10 feet, 20 feet, and adjust and jog and get specifically what you need. So lots of stuff that if you see that on a regular basis, really easy to set up a template that's just geared to do that. But specifically for decks, and specifically in that concept of, let's say that we had a low, kind of a lower to the ground deck where it has a beam running along and you've got posts every 5 feet as you're sort of just designing or laying out this generic deck. So what I've done is I've taken a different approach to my beams, where typically I would use a segment tool to draw out that beam. That'd be typically the better approach. But in this case, where it's I don't really need a condition, I don't need something to be flush, this is just going to sit underneath. So what I've done is I've actually drawn this with the linear tool. I've picked out my product that I like to use, like a 2x8 SYP number 2 treated. It's 2 plies. So I'm drawing my beam, but then also what I've associated with this is, again, another count spacing. Every 48 inches, I am getting a post, or it could be a deck post, it could be labeled as. And that product is going to be 4x4 SYP number 2 treated, and the length that's been set for it is 4 feet. Maybe you want it to be 2 feet, maybe you want it to be 8 feet, whatever. But now I can draw in these deck beams And as I draw on these deck beams, I'm automatically getting those deck posts that are just those supporting posts going down to those pier footings or whatever. They're already being arrayed out there for me. And if I need to add another one on the end, I can always right click on that post and to draw more counts like this, like I've done there, and just draw that one into place. So again, there's times and places that even breaking away from some of the standard uses of tools and drifting over into a different tool to accomplish purpose can be a great way to leverage the presets function to get more quickly to what the output you're after. So that kind of rounds out the discussion from today. But yeah, so the overall takeaway would be look at presets, whether they relate to the takeoff tools or to the markup tools, and see just in your daily workflow, how can you create some ones that are more unique to your system that save you some time. We'll leave the Q&A session open a little bit here. So if you have some questions yet, maybe on a specific preset type that you're thinking of, feel free to type in there. We'll do that. And then for those of you who maybe didn't have a chance, I'll go ahead and also launch this this poll one more time if I can. Well, I might not be able to at this point, but yeah, but join us again for next time, and we'll share some more thoughts with you. So yeah, I'll talk to you more later. Thanks.